What happens to victims during trauma caused by narcissistic abuse?
The pain of narcissistic abuse cuts deep. Like a stealthy assassin, it slips into our lives unnoticed and proceeds to slowly poison every aspect of our being. By the time we realize we are victims, the damage is often severe. Our sense of self lies shattered. Confusion clouds our reality. Fear paralyzes our spirit. All that remains is a shell of the person we once were, the light inside us muted by layers of darkness and despair. Let us begin.
The devastating effects of narcissistic abuse.
Shock and disbelief. The awakening is often sudden and deeply disturbing. One day, a switch flips, and the loving partner we once knew transforms into a cold and calculating stranger. Their once endearing quirks now appear more sinister, pathological even. The charm fades, replaced by a toxic push and pull of idealization and devaluation. What remains are mind games galore, unpredictable rage, searing criticism, and confusing double standards. At first, we scramble to pacify them, walking on eggshells to avoid sparking an outburst. Nothing works. The outbursts continue, often triggered by increasingly irrational reasons. Each attack chips away at our self-worth until we start doubting our own sanity. This shocking reversal is by design. Narcissists expertly suck us into a spider's web of love bombing and manipulation at the start of relationships. Once they know we are hooked, they unleash their true selves, lacking empathy, exploiting others for ego supply, devoid of conscience. For those new to the narcissistic abuse cycle, the abrupt change is inconceivable. This can't be the same person I fell in love with. There must be some misunderstanding. If I just try a little harder, maybe they will go back to how they used to be. This is denial. It offers a temporary buffer against the grim truth that the who they presented originally was a carefully crafted facade, but eventually, the ugly reality becomes impossible to escape. We isolate ourselves, riddled with shame and confusion about how we got here. We research endlessly, looking for answers. We reach out to the narcissist with rage and pleadings, desperate to evoke a shred of humanity in them. It's a futile attempt. The narcissist has no intention of taking accountability or working on the relationship. For them, the relationship is little more than a game where they hold all the cards. The more we try to make them care, the more smug and aggressive their abuse becomes. It takes hitting rock bottom for most victims to accept the hard facts we are dealing with a narcissist. The situation will never get better. This is psychological warfare. For many, this realization marks the first step in a long healing journey. The armor of denial cracks, and the path ahead opens up.
Grieving the Fantasy.
Enduring narcissistic abuse is akin to being repeatedly stabbed by a trusted lover. First comes the knife piercing your back, then the sadistic twisting once it's inside. The psychological effects are devastating. In many ways, recovering from narcissistic abuse mirrors the grief process. And make no mistake, there is much grief to be processed. We start by mourning the fantasy, the relationship we thought we had before the narcissist's mask slipped off. This was the idealized phase where they showered us with flattery and appeared to be our perfect romantic partner. During this honeymoon period, which often lasts months, the narcissist places us on a pedestal. They mirror our deepest longings and shower us with promises of everlasting love. For those with abandonment wounds and unmet attachment needs, this feels like a soothing balm. Intoxicated by new love and focused outward on pleasing the narcissist, we ignore subtle red flags and suppress inner doubts. The fantasy blindsides us to the manipulations hiding beneath their perfect facade. Until one day, without warning, they abruptly drop the act. The pedestal disappears from beneath our feet, and we come crashing down to the ground. Love bombing turns to devaluation. Adoration becomes criticism. For victims, this represents a shocking betrayal of trust and loss of the dream. We grieve what we hoped the relationship could have been, our yearning for real intimacy and validation. The fantasy offered an illusion of everything we wanted coming true at last. Disillusioning, this is a bitter pill to swallow. Making matters worse, the narcissist continues twisting the knife with more lies and triangulation, manufacturing chaos to keep us off balance. Rather than provide closure, they ensure the wound stays open and painful, eliciting maximum supply. During this turbulent time, we must process why we were so attached to the fantasy, despite the lack of substance beneath it. Working with a therapist helps uncover our inner emotional gaps and unrealistic expectations so they become conscious. This enables healthier relationship choices going forward. The fantasy may die, but our capacity to hope doesn't have to. Once the grief runs its course, we can emerge wiser, with deeper compassion, and open to love again.
Anxiety and hypervigilance.
Like getting whiplash, the abrupt unpredictability of narcissistic abuse leaves us in a perpetual state of unease, anxiety, and hypervigilance. Our senses shift into overdrive, always scanning for threats and waiting for the next painful attack. In the idealization phase, the narcissist made us feel safe and cherished. Now in the devaluation phase, they methodically shred our sense of security. We never know what minor infraction may set them off on a rage. Tension pervades the atmosphere. Our anxiety skyrockets as the abuse continues. We start walking on eggshells, adapting our speech and behavior to avoid triggering them. None of it works. They find fault in everything we do, watching for any misstep to use as ammo for more assaults. We feel trapped in a war zone with this emotional terrorist, never knowing when the next bomb will detonate. Anxiety gives way to despair as fight mode repeatedly fails to provide safety. Our nervous system zooms into overdrive until we are depleted. Research shows that enduring the unpredictability of emotional abuse activates similar biochemical responses as physical trauma. Our brain gets rewired to operate in a perpetual state of high alert. Unfortunately, even after separating from the narcissist, these patterns tend to persist. Our body continues bracing for threats that no longer exist. We struggle to let our guard down and relax. With patience and support, our senses can return to homeostasis and blossom to full aliveness once more. The world feels less threatening and more inviting.
The physical and financial impact.
While narcissistic abuse is psychological in nature, its impact spans far beyond just the mind. Effects bleed over into wreaking havoc on physical health and financial security as well. The chronic stress endured lives in every cell of survivors' bodies. Related conditions like adrenal fatigue, autoimmune disorders, migraines, and chronic pain often result and require medical treatment. On top of existing medical costs, the narcissist's financial abuse compounds economic devastation. From sabotaging careers, to draining joint assets, to inculcating scarcity mindsets, narcissists instill poverty consciousness even in previously high-earning victims. Economic abuse is one of their favorite methods for ensuring continued control. In the aftermath, regaining physical vitality demands integrating self-care practices once relentlessly subverted by the narcissist. Gentle movement, mindfulness, energy-healing modalities, improving sleep hygiene and nutrition can begin restoring balance to dysregulated mind-body systems caught in a traumatized freeze state. As we renew ourselves bodily, we shed narratives of physical inadequacy narcissists inscribed. As we restore economic security, we reinforce beliefs about deserving safety and sufficiency they tried so hard to etch over. The physical and financial recovery process is as much biological as psychological rebirth into self-sovereignty. If any part of this resonated with your own experiences of narcissistic abuse, you're not alone. Join our community by subscribing to this channel for more insights and strategies on healing from this trauma. Drop a comment below to share which stage you relate to, most the shock, the grief, or the anxiety. Your voice and story matter.